Welcome to the Executive Corner Expert Talks by Kalkine TV. I'm Sage, but today's guest is Mr. Vincent Fletcher, the CEO of CartonCloud. And CartonCloud streamlines your accounting and admin tasks from route optimisation to invoice creation, all in one place. They ensure every step of your transport and warehouse management operations is transparent, flawlessly controlled and efficiently conducted, in their own words. And as you know, we bring you the industry leaders, successful business owners, all under the one roof to help you discover the insights of the stock markets. So bringing you live today, we have Mr. Vincent Fletcher, CEO of CartonCloud. Welcome to the show, Vincent.
Hey, thanks very much for having me on.
Pleasure to meet you. Thanks for making time for us. And there's been some encouraging data collated from CartonCloud's Logistics Index, CCLI, showing high industry optimism, strong growth expectations. We're keen to find out more. Could you tell us how the index aggregates this data and what was the motivation behind your brand, please?
Yeah, sure. So we began the CartonCloud Logistics Index to just sort of get a bit of a snapshot of how the SME 3PL logistics space is viewing, business conditions. And of course, the last 18 months have been sort of unlike anything else. What we found is that this kind of information, it's not easy to say access just from, general sources, because it's quite a niche specific industry. But we thought that it would be really valuable to get that information together, being able to sort of combine it with the network of 3PLs that we are in business with, and share it with everyone. So the way that it works is every quarter we send out a questionnaire, and the questionnaire has a total of 8 questions on it. Of those 8 questions, 3 of them are the same each time. And those questions are: how do you expect your business to perform in the next 6 months? What is your view of the current economic climate for your business? And based on the economic climate and the performance of your business, how would you rate the likelihood that your business will bring on additional staff within the next 6 months? So we're really just trying to get a sense check of how they're viewing, the situation that they're in and how they believe their business is going to perform. And what we do is we take the answers to those first 3 questions and we combine them together, and then we end up with what we're calling our index value. Now, because this is the second time we've run this quarterly index, we had a baseline that we could use from the last index that we ran. So how that works is last time we ended up with some scores, and we used that to create a baseline of 100. And then this time when we ran the index again, we could use the same aggregated scores from the second quarter. And basically, if we got a score of greater than 100, it would show that people were more optimistic than they had been in the previous quarter. And conversely, if the index came out at less than 100, then it meant that they were less optimistic. The index itself in Q2, although it was still really good, it did see a slight drop. So we actually saw that businesses on the whole went down from our baseline of 100 down to a score of 86. And I mean, there's been significant ongoing lockdowns through, most of Australia, most of Australia's population for sort of the last 4 months. And we believe that this had, a bit of an impact on some of those scores that we saw.
What interesting information. Thank you. And going to all that trouble to get that data aggregated, but for a very good purpose. Thanks for sharing that. How long have you been running that index for?
So this is the second time that we've run it. So we're currently collecting data for the third index. So that would cover the period from July through to October. Okay. So the way that it works is that if people fill out the form, then they can immediately access the results of the previous index. So we've done that to try and encourage businesses to put this information in order to actually, get data coming in that we can use to share with everybody again afterward.
Fantastic. Yeah. Straight from the horse's mouth. Well, thank you so much for that. It's very interesting to hear what the results were, and we'll discuss that more with you now. So we've seen some global havoc over the supply chain, logistics and shipping costs and delays across several industries that you touched on a bit there. How has the Australian logistics industry stayed neutral to the economic shifts, government stimulus and changes to business practices in response to the pandemic?
It's a good question. So I think it's like COVID-19 has been both good and bad for logistics. Obviously, you've got supply chain issues with a lot of international freight, and this is coming out of issues with, say, manufacturing shortages, like you're seeing with chip manufacturing slowing down, parts that people need to build computers and cars and things. But then you've also got issues with containers sort of getting stockpiled in certain locations and not able to get back, which makes it even worse when they're trying to ship things internationally. However, although that's going on at sort of that international and often sea freight level, then you've got, a really large number of people who previously weren't doing much on the e-commerce space now ordering a lot of stuff online and getting it delivered to their homes or to their businesses. The majority of the businesses that have been responding to our quarterly index are involved in the last mile. So they're typically businesses that are delivering, food and beverage, furniture. They might be doing e-commerce fulfillment as well. Basically anything that they can deliver using a truck at the end. So a lot of these guys saw freight surges, and but the downside that I think they would have experienced simultaneously was probably more pricing pressure. People's expectations increasing quite dramatically around them because there is so much more home delivery stuff going on now. The way that you need to perform in that market has gone up. So I think they probably saw increased demand for their services, but probably also higher pricing pressure. And I think those two things together would have led to a bit of a neutral outcome on the whole.
Great, thank you so much for your insiders' insights there. It's definitely looking much different from the outside in compared to the inside out, so we do appreciate that. There seems to be quite a variance between what the senior staff said to the operational staff in regards to the level of optimism on the economic climate. Do you have any insights to share on that? According to the data, I think it said that 70% of the senior staff were optimistic, yet only 40% of the operational staff were tending towards optimism.
Yeah, my read on that was, we're largely sampling small, medium-sized businesses. And so in a lot of cases, the senior staff are the owners or somebody well connected to the owner. And I looked at the data and I found it quite surprising at first, but then I thought, in order to start a small business, you really have to be an optimist, because there's so many challenges that come up along the way that people that aren't optimistic, they don't typically go out and begin businesses. I think it's probably partly just how those two different groups in general, and I know that I'm sort of stereotyping here a bit, but how those two different groups actually view opportunity in general. And I think that in a lot of cases when you're dealing with SMEs, the guys that are running them, they have to be optimists. And those results come through in the survey that we conducted. I mean, as opposed to, say, some of the staff that they might have hired who, they're simply not in those shoes. They don't have to be.
Great, thank you so much. It's so true what you say there. The people that run the companies, it's a 24-hour job really, and the fact that they're creating opportunities for people to jump on board and get some great deals and even to be employees is fantastic. It's really what keeps the cogs and screws ticking in industry and the economy. So great to hear that a majority of the respondents this quarter believe their businesses will perform well or very well in the next 6 months. That's definitely inspiring to hear. How do you think the hiring intentions will be impacted by this?
So it was interesting, of those 3 questions that I mentioned at the start, the first 2 about how do you just see your business performing, how do you see the economic climate at the moment, and then the last one being, how do you feel like, will you be bringing on more staff in the next 6 months? The results for the first 2 actually remained really similar to the first quarter, but we had a 37% drop in optimism around hiring more people into the organization. And so that was quite interesting. And I mean, that contributed to, the vast majority of the total drop from 100 to 86. I think a big part of this is potentially technology coming in and having a role, and businesses realizing that they can't just solve some of these problems by simply adding more headcount to their organizations, especially if they're coming under pricing pressure for the reasons that I spoke about earlier. And so I think in some cases now they're probably figuring out, like, how do we work smarter rather than just layering in more cost in order to do this additional volume. Just anecdotally, in the last 6 months, we've seen, quite a few businesses sign up to our application who had sort of previously been on the fence for, 18 months to 2 years. And in a lot of those cases, they were citing that their customers are just demanding better technology, or that they simply have to figure out a way to do things more efficiently to remain competitive. So I did wonder if there was, if that was the primary driver behind these stats that we're seeing.
There certainly has been a lot of technological developments occurring even in the last 18 months. So it's very interesting to see the impacts it's having on industry. We're coming to the end of our discussion now, Vincent, and investors are putting more pressure on businesses to take consideration of their ESG policies. And there were no respondents who believed their operations were very good at following environmentally friendly practices, while a majority of the respondents, which was 82%, thought their operations were okay. Now, do you think this has something to do with the Australian federal government's perhaps indecisiveness on their carbon emissions policy? Do you think this could be what's causing businesses to maybe not do as much as they could?
Yeah, it's a great question. Now, we didn't have data from the first CCLI around this particular question, so we didn't have anything to compare it to. Do people think that they're doing better, or do they think that they're doing worse quarter on quarter? Because this made up one of the 5 questions, which is sort of a new question just to get some interesting information. Our take is that it's so hard to know what good looks like in this space at the moment. And I think, there's a real lack of clear guidelines on how, individuals or businesses can make a meaningful contribution towards, the reduction of CO2, or just how they can better, handle waste and these kinds of things. What we found in our data was that 70% of the responders stated that they were implementing paperless technologies as sort of the most common way that they felt that they were becoming more environmentally friendly, obviously reducing paper waste. After that, it was followed by people improving the way in which they dispose of waste. So in logistics, you end up with a ton of pallet wrapping, which is sort of plastic, almost like Glad wrap that you wrap around pallets. You end up with lots and lots of cardboard. And the way in which that stuff is collected and recycled, it has a big impact on how much of that just ends up in landfill versus actually getting reused. After they'd looked at those two, the next largest was that businesses were looking towards route optimization as a way in which they could reduce their consumption or their environmental tax. And a big thing there is that if you're really effectively using a route optimization tool, then the number of miles that your drivers need to go, the amount of fuel that they need to burn, it reduces. And ideally this wouldn't be an issue. And I'm sad to see how we got shown all these great Tesla trucks, I think 2 or 3 years ago now, and you still can't buy them, right? And I think that whole market is still sort of in its infancy, which is really sad. And we saw that in the data, only 14% of the businesses that were out polling said that they were looking to invest in electric vehicles to help improve their green practices, which was surprising given the hype around them. And I think it's just showing that that market is sort of taking more time to come online than what they had expected in this sort of commercial sense.
Exactly. There's, I think there'll be some progress in the next few years. I've heard New South Wales has put out a roadmap to introduce more electric vehicles and some road use incentives. But yes, we definitely are lagging in regards to that. But there's been some interesting developments with electric vehicle trucks coming out of Queensland. I think we had someone on the show not long ago. So I guess as it becomes more popular, it'll be advertised more, hopefully. Thank you so much.
The commercials of them are going to just revolutionise everything if you don't have to fix trucks, because they're super expensive just to keep running. But at the moment, and if you're running, say, a refrigerated warehouse in summer, and you're trying to either run it at refrigerated or frozen temperatures, even if you've got that whole thing covered in solar, there's no way that you can cover the electricity consumption of the condensers that you need to do it. And it's a real shame, because you continue to have to pull power from the grid, which the majority of which is produced by coal.
Very true. Thank you so much, Vincent, for sharing your insights today. We greatly appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
And best of luck with your near-term goals with CartonCloud as well.
Thank you so much. Have a nice afternoon.
Thank you. And if you've just joined us, we had an informative discussion with Mr. Vincent Fletcher, CEO of CartonCloud, and the full recorded interview will be available via YouTube at Kalkine Media. Please keep watching Kalkine for more expert talks, live market updates, and as we say, stay apprised and invest wise with Kalkine.